Welcome to the Holy Smokes Podcast, a show about faith, friendship, fine tobacco, and drink. I'm Steve Ryder, and this freaking COVID thing is driving me nuts. I can't get in-person interviews, and I got to resort to Zoom because I got nothing left in the can. I missed an episode last week, and now... Anyway, Kay texted me this morning, and he was like, Steve, get the guys from Providencia on. Let's talk about Providencia Cigars, Holy Smokers. Kind of started it and running it, and I'm a big fan. I've gotten some Providencia sticks from Raymond, and Reed has handed me some when he's been here in town, and I am a fan. I love their sticks, and I'm glad to have guys in the Holy Smokes community that are producing boutique cigars. And so I got Jim on the Holy Smokes podcast. Jim Faber from Providencia Cigars. Thanks for being on, my man.
Thank you for the invite.
Well, we were going to have Raymond on as well, but he was having some Zoom problems, and so we're just going to kind of go with it with just you. I told you before we started recording, my goal is to get down to Dallas this year because there is at least somewhere between 7 and 12 interviews within that whole area of various dudes. And so I've got 3 or 4 guys that have told me, Steve, if you come down, you can stay with me. And so, hey, cool. If all I got to do is get an airfare and pay for food, and I'm being shuttled around and maybe an Uber once in a while to get to some various stuff, I'm there. And so we will get your full story and Raymond's full story and a bunch of other dudes that are down there. But
absolutely. Ray and Lori have a beautiful backyard with just a gorgeous pool and hot tub, and it's just picturesque. It's really nice. So we could set up back there and go for it.
You are getting me anxious to get the heck out of Dodge and get back to hanging out with people, because this thing is like, I'd say just in the last week, I have really gone stir crazy. Like, it's like, I think it's probably because the weather here in Colorado has suddenly shifted and we've got 70-degree days and it's sunny and beautiful. And I'm like, I need to get out hiking. I need to get just out and see people. And I think that's probably it. So, Jim, you have got a crazy story. So because we're going to go more in depth into the entire thing when I'm down there in the Dallas area, kind of abbreviate it a little bit and then talk about how you guys and why you guys created Providencia Cigars.
Yeah, sure. So I'll do my best to keep it short, and we can go over some details later. But I gave my life to Christ when I was a junior, and I was going to a state school right outside of Philadelphia. I was a junior in college and really had a radical transformation and life shift, and ended up going to Liberty University for my final year, and really is what sparked a passion in my heart to give back and serve. And I knew I wanted to be in ministry somehow. I just didn't know what to do, where to start, how to start. And so while I was praying and pondering over what to do, a friend who was mentoring me, his name was Don Weber, and he invited me. He had several trips for over 20, 30 years down to Honduras, and did a lot of pastoral training and leadership training down there. And he invited me to go with him to Occupy the Children. And he said, there's so many kids down there, and it would be awesome if you could take your soccer expertise and do some camps for the kids and share the gospel with them through soccer. Soccer's worship in that country. And so I thought it was an awesome idea. I got my passport, and 2 weeks before we were supposed to leave, Don called me. He was out in California ministering to some churches out there, and called and said that the Lord was not going to let him go with me. I said, what are you talking about? God's not going to let you go with me. He said, I think it's time for you to get out of the roost on your own and fly on your own. I think you're ready. You need to get out there and experience it and go by yourself. So he gave me some contacts of some missionaries that were in Honduras, and I called them on the phone, and they said, wow, we've been praying for somebody to come and help spark our youth ministry. We do a lot of medical outreach, but we really don't have a whole lot for children. And so I came down and started doing soccer camps all over the country, and they were a huge hit. And one thing led to another. I was supposed to be there for 2 weeks. I ended up spending the entire summer there. And at the end of the summer, I decided that that's what I felt like God was telling me to do. So I came back to the United States, sold what little I had. I didn't have much. I was just graduated college, and worked for another 6 months and saved all my money. And I kind of calculated what I need to live off of for a year. And I went down there, just went down there and started doing stuff for God. I was going to give it a year and learn the language. And while I was down there the first time, the local pro soccer team, which was a Division II pro team at the time, invited me, saw that I was doing all these camps and invited me to play in this pickup game with them. And then the coach approached me after the game and asked if I would try out for the pro team, which I thought was like the coolest thing in the world. And I signed a pro contract and ended up playing with them for a little bit. But the whole purpose for me was just to use soccer as a vehicle to share Christ with people. And, that's years later, I met Reed Grafke. And fast forward, now he's on staff at Gateway Church, which I'm sure all you guys are familiar with Gateway. And so he came down, brought a team down, and fell in love with the country and fell in love with what we were doing. Anyway, long story short, I met a third-generation tobacco grower several years later. And I was in the city of Danlí, and Javier at the time was the general manager of Alec Bradley, the plant that Alec Bradley's cigars are made out of. It's owned by Raíces Cubanos. It's a Cuban ownership, but Javier was the general manager of the plant. And he kind of gave me a 101 tour. I smoked my first cigar, got sick, but I absolutely fell in love with the process. On my next trip back to that city, he took me out to his land and showed me where it was grown, showed me how they aged it and procured it. And several visits after that, he encouraged me, said, "Why don't you make your own blend? Why don't you start your own business?" And I laughed at him, and I said, I don't know. I'm never going to use this as a business. He said, "Why not?" He said, "You're really good at it. You have a knack for it."
Did he explain what he saw in you?
Yeah, because we sat in his office, and every time I'd go to visit, Danlí was 4 hours from where I lived. So whenever I went to the city, he'd have anywhere from 6 to 10 new blends that he was working on. And so we would sit there in the office and smoke 6 to 10 cigars a day. And then he would ask me questions. He'd ask me what flavor profiles, the things that I was picking up in the cigar, the differences between the cigars. And then he started to share with me the differences in flavors between the wrappers and the binders and how the fillers change things. And so as he would quiz me, I would typically always pick out his and the other shop manager's favorite too. Yeah. And he would stick a bunch of bad cigars in there and a few good ones to see if I could pick them out. But he would never tell me which ones were good and which ones were bad. Anyway, that's how he found out I had a knack for picking out the profiles and the different distinctions in the notes of the tobacco.
So he tells you, you've got a knack for this. You should create a business. I don't know. What shifted?
Well, I thought, you know what? Why not? Let's do it. And so my goal was to come up with a cigar that I would like to smoke every day. Like that was the only cigar left on the planet, that would be a great go-to cigar. I'd love to smoke it every day. In fact, that's what I'm smoking right now, which was the cigar that we started the company on. It's called the El Santo, the Saint. And so, it took about 30 different blends, and Reed Grafke was very instrumental in helping with that. So I would send a lot of the different blends that I liked back up to Reed, and that's when he was living in Colorado, and got a lot of feedback from him and a lot of his friends. And it was, I want to say in 2013, I went to the factory, and he had a couple different cigars, and I knew as soon as I looked at it that the wrapper was different than anything else that I had tried before. And so I smoked it, and I said, "This is it. This is it." I said, "What's the wrapper?" He said, "This is a Sumatra wrapper." And prior to that, I had never smoked a Sumatra wrapper, and I fell in love. I love the flavor. Yeah. I love the profile. We tweaked it a bit. We added a little bit more strength. We added a couple Ligero leaves inside the cigar to make it a little bit stronger. And I wanted kind of a medium, full-bodied flavor, but I didn't want it too overpowering. And we hit on it, and I had a bunch of people check it out in the States, and everybody loved it. And so it just sat on the shelves. It was like, all right, we've got a blend. But I had no idea. I was still living in Honduras and had no idea how to start the business. So Reed and I, just little by little, just started getting paperwork together, started filing for paperwork in the States, which I'm sure you guys understand. It's years and years of process sometimes to get approved and get your license. And so we started to do that.
So when did you guys start this journey? What year was that when you guys came up with the El Santo blend?
I knew that in 2013 we had the El Santo blend ready. What we didn't have was the name. We didn't have marketing. We didn't have box designs. We didn't have permission to bring cigars into the United States. We didn't have all the different permits that you need to begin to sell in the United States. And so that's what we worked on from there. In 2000, I'm sorry, I said 2013. I'm totally off. I am fried. Sorry, guys. That was 2007, 2008 timeframe is when we came up with the El Santo. And then because I was already out of the country at 2013, I was already back here in the United States. May of 2011 is when I was thrown in a vehicle at gunpoint and ended up escaping a kidnapping attempt on my life. And the only U.S. military presence that we have in Central America was actually in the same city that I lived in. And so I immediately called a private investigator who was a military expert and helped Americans if they had any issues with kidnapping. And within 24 hours, less than 24 hours, he had a report. He knew who was involved. It was a Mexican drug cartel that hired a local bilingual Honduran thug to kidnap me at gunpoint, and they felt like I was a low risk. They called me a soft target, and so that's why they only sent one person. He said otherwise, if they felt like you were going to be somebody hard to get, you would have had two guys with machine guns pointed at the back of your head and one guy in the front driving the car. But they only ended up sending one guy, and I was able to eventually get some help. The story takes a while to tell.
We'll definitely, when I'm down there, we will definitely go into a lot of those details. And
sure. So anyway, the agent that investigated said they've got all your phones tapped. They have your daughter who you're trying to adopt. There's Raymond.
Raymond!
All right.
Just joined us. So let's continue. Phone tapped.
Yeah, so they had my oldest daughter who was 14 at the time. I found her in a trash dump and rescued her. I brought her in. She started to live with us when she was 9, right before she was 10 years old. And she started in kindergarten, so we fostered her. Wow. And at the age of 14, we decided that we were going to adopt her. And so we were we had just started the adoption process when the kidnapping attempt happened. And so anyway, they had Lily's phone tapped and my phone tapped. Don't ask me why they had Lily's phone tapped, but they had both of our phones. I guess so they knew the movement of my children, and then they knew my movements. Yes. And so the investigator said, "You've got to leave the country right now." So my father flew down the next day and took my 2 natural-born children. He flew them back to Philadelphia, and they spent all summer with them while my wife and I and Lily hid out at different places in the country where I felt safe. And it was 3 months later, we still couldn't get the adoption expedited. And so I ended up leaving Lily and my wife in Honduras, and I flew to the United States, and a friend of mine gave me a job in Texas, and that's how I ended up in Texas. And so my parents flew down from Philadelphia, reunited with my 2 children, and got them in school, and then had to start my life all over again. So the cigar business was definitely put on the shelf for a while.
Yeah, understandably.
It was the last thing that I was really thinking about at the time.
So you and Reed were really the two that really kind of started this. How did Ray, you might as well unmute yourself now that you've joined us. How did Ray get involved in this?
Well, Ray and I knew each other because his church started to support us and started sending mission teams down to Honduras. I want to say, maybe he'll give you the exact date. I'm maybe saying 2006, I think, was the first year that they came down. And every time I would come back to speak at their church or to do missions-related activities at their church, Ray and I became friends because we were both Eagle fans, and we found out we both grew up in the same area. Never knew each other until we met here.
Now, for the non-sports fans that are listening, we probably should explain. You guys are in the Dallas area, which is the Dallas Cowboys, and they're probably, I'd say, their biggest arch rival are the Philadelphia Eagles. And so Absolutely. It is as bitter of a rivalry as exists in the NFL. You got the Packers Bears, you got the Packers Vikings, you got the Chiefs Raiders, Broncos Raiders, and then, of course, that NFC East kind of round table between the Redskins, the Giants, the Cowboys, and the Eagles, which none of them like each other.
That's right. So I had to grab hold of my Eagle fan, and I didn't let go. But Ray and his wife were really they heard about what happened to me in Honduras, and the whole church really embraced us. They donated beds and dressers and couches. They because I had to we lost everything. I couldn't sell anything in Honduras because everybody knew my plight, so nobody wanted to give me any money for anything. And so Ray and Lori really surrounded me and my kids. On the weekend, I worked and then went to school at night to be a teacher, so I had to get my teaching certification. So at night when my kids were sleeping, I'd be studying. And so on the weekends, I was absolutely fried. So I'd go over Ray and Lori's house, and we'd swim in their pool, and they'd just love on us and, let the kids have fun. And that's really how Ray and I began to talk about cigars. And Ray didn't even really smoke cigars that much back then. And I told him about the cigars that we were working on, and I told him about the business, and Ray fell in love with it. So we really needed Ray as well, because Ray's got a extensive marketing and sales background. And so Ray was really the piece that we needed to really launch.
My gosh,
so
I'm so frazzled.
Go from there.
Technical difficulties. You have no idea. I came out here early, set up. I had my coffee, my cigar, a little stand for the phone to sit on, and then it all went to crap. It's like, oh my gosh. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. My coffee's cold now. It's a mess. But I'm glad you talked to Jim. I was trying to tell you, like, he's way more interesting than me. His story is the story.
Well, to give listeners a little bit of for those that weren't on this Zoom call, a little bit of the backstory of what was going on. So a few weeks ago, when everything was blowing up about Zoom bombing, people were basically infiltrating Zoom meetings and showing porn or writing inappropriate things, racial slurs, whatever. Forbes came out with an article that said, lock your account down. This is what you need to do. And for some reason, a few people weren't able to get into this call. They've been able to get into other calls, but not this one in particular. And so I went in and I unchecked the authenticated users in the background right at the beginning of this interview. And Ray still couldn't get on, but now he's here. And I feel at peace. Ray, take a deep breath. Take a deep breath.
Like an hour. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Yeah. Oh, my gosh. But anyway, I'm glad to be here.
All right. So, Ray, let's get back to the story. So Jim gets back to the States.
Right.
You're pouring into them. You're just loving on them and ministering to them, helping them. And what kind of drew you to be a part of this with Reed and Jim?
Originally, it was a business proposition. So I think I'd shared with some of you guys on other calls that my background was in the home video industry, which is basically, you know, after the movie, the theatrical divisions of movie studios, whether they're majors or minors, release their films in their first window, which is normally theatrical, or it could be TV, could be the first window, it's a television show. And then the home entertainment divisions of all the studios, and whether big or small, their group of people would take them to retail on DVD. When I started, it was the VHS business was what was happening. That was in 1988. But basically, for close to 30 years, I sold movies and television shows into the home entertainment market to retail. So Best Buy, Walmart, Target, wherever you bought or rented DVDs, I worked for companies that had proprietary rights to those programs. So Jim came to the States in 2011. We started talking about, you know, the cigar business during that time. And, you know, all of us on the physical goods side saw the writing on the wall that the business was going to definitely start shifting to digital transactions versus physical goods transactions, much like the audio business, right? Went from CD to digital. So it took a few years for that to really happen. But by 2016, I retired from the video industry, and that's a whole other story. But to answer your question more directly, I was looking for a plan B. I figured that my video career was going to be ending soon, and it sounded like cigars could be fun. I had no idea whether we could make money at it or not, but decided with my wife that we would give it a shot, and we would nurture it until video went away. And then who knows if maybe by then something with cigars would be happening financially. So originally It was a financial business partnership. And originally all I was really going to do was finance the growing of the tobacco. So I don't know if Jim told you that part of the story where our cigar producer has his own factory and owns his own land, and he grows coffee and tobacco. So I was just going to basically finance the growing of the tobacco that we would use in the cigars, the Honduran part, and possibly finance the procurement of other world tobaccos to produce the cigars. So that was really going to be all I was doing in the beginning, those first couple of years, is paying for the growing of the tobacco and trying to get the company launched. That's how I originally got into it. And then once my video job went away, and even a little bit before that, you know, once we had the cigars in the States in June of 2016, I was starting to dabble in sales. I would take cigars with me on the road in different markets when we were calling on, you know, Target, Minneapolis. I'd look for cigar shops and pop by and drop off some samples. And so I was doing that throughout the year, you know, maybe a half a dozen to a dozen shops at the most, you know, over the course of a few years, just seeing if there was, what kind of interest there was out there.
So at what point, gentlemen, did the El Padre get released? Because when I first became familiar with you guys, those were the two sticks you had, El Santo and El Padre.
Right. So June of 2016 is when we launched in the U.S., right? So we started growing tobacco in 2012, and we put our first production order of El Santo and El Padre at the same time. So we didn't know what we were doing as far as how many cigars to produce, what to do. So we had those two blends, and we had two Vitolas in each blend. We had a Toro in both blends and a Robusto Gordo in both blends. And we had Javier roll us 30,000 cigars with no retail, no distribution, nothing. Just we had a way to get them into the country, and someone did store them for us. But we had our permits. We had a distribution permit and a retail permit, but we had nothing set up as far as, you know, shops waiting for product or anything. So those were the two blends that Jim and Reed developed in the early stages. So that's what we went with. And it wasn't until January of 2018, that we introduced our third blend, which was the Trinitas.
To expound on that, Steve, the reason why we came up with the El Padre was because we thought, well, we can't just come out with one cigar, right? And so it would be kind of cool to have, one that's a medium to bold type of cigar, and another cigar that was more on the mild side. So
Yeah.
Ray, it was actually, I think, Ray's suggestion that we come out with something that was more like a Connecticut for the novice smoker or the beginner smoker or somebody that just doesn't want something that bold. And so that's when we started to develop and work on some blends for a lighter stick. And once we felt comfortable with the blend, we called it the Father, El Padre. And so that we coupled that with the Saint, and that's what we launched with.
Well, I believe that the El Padre and El Santo are dollar for dollar one of the better cigars that I've had. I enjoy them. It's a nice little stick that just the taste is just beautiful. And I've bought them a few times from Etienne when Etienne was kind of your local reseller, and used that in my humidor. So you released the Trinitas. Which, I'm going to be dead honest with you, the first time I had it, I was like, it's okay. The second time I had it, I was like, I don't know what happened, but this is like, ooh.
Yeah, totally different.
And it was from that first shipment that Ray sent me, probably, I want to say, earlier this year.
Yeah.
And there was something about it, I was like, whoa, all right, I missed it the first time.
Well,
Talk about where that one came from.
That cigar really kind of put us on the map, especially because the shop that we really kind of concentrated on locally is called the Underground. And the Underground is world renowned for all of their boutique cigars. And I'd say 95% of what they sell out of there come with dark wrappers, and they're bold cigars, medium to bold predominantly. And we really felt like we needed a stick that kind of set the tone for something a little spicier, something a little juicier, something a little meatier. And we actually, we loved that. I think that year or the year prior, I think it was the year prior, it was 2017, Cigar of the Year was by Oliva, and it was the Oliva Milanio. And it was a box press double torpedo, so it was torpedoed on both ends. It was really cool looking. And Reed and I just loved the look. So did Ray, and we decided, look, well, let's come out with that Vitola. And so we had to work on a blend. So that blend is predominantly all Ligero. So that's all your top, predominantly all your top leaves. And it took a while till we got. I flew down there. Ray actually flew down as well. We flew down there and taste tested a lot of different cigars and ended up coming up with that. And the Trinity, just, we threw around names, and we really wanted to bring it full circle, kind of El Padre, El Santo. Let's just, bring the Trinity up, since it was the third cigar. and I think it was Reed who, we must have texted a zillion names back and forth to each other.
It was me. I'm going to take all the credit. I was smoking, because I want the story to be straight. I'm not a credit hog, so the more you get to know me, I just to set the record straight. I was smoking that Oliva V series, and I love that cigar. Yeah. And absolutely loved everything about it. So I suggested to Jim and to Reed at the time that we go with that type of a Vitola. And I started Googling names and looking at biblically for how else we could tie something spiritual into what we already had. So that's the Trinitas came from my research, and then I pitched it to those two guys, and they were both into it, and that's where we went.
Yeah, I think we had Trinity, and then I think Reed texted one night, why don't we go with the Greek word of Trinity, and that was Trinitas, and we all loved it. And it was predominantly Ray. Ray's been great at marketing all the new names. Ray's done just an absolutely knocked it awesome job at the Hostage. The Hostage was our fourth cigar, and that obviously after the story about the kidnapping, and he's come out with some just fantastic names for the cigars. That believe it or not, that's one of the hardest things to do, because almost all the names are taken by the big companies. You can't do anything.
We got 2 cease and desist. I was doing pretty well with names until I got 2 cease and desist letters. They scared me. Because we don't have any legal team or anything. We'll get these, letters from lawyers, cease and desist, this because of this and that, for 2 names that we had picked out that we had already went to market with, and we had to go jump through a bunch of hoops to be compliant.
To change those names.
Yeah, get them off the market, take all the bands off, and sell them without bands. It was a mess, but it was a great learning curve. I think the Lord really, has blessed us all along with even like little mishaps. He's protected us. He's allowed us to make errors and to learn from them. So we give all the glory to the Lord for where we are now, which is we're still small, we're just organic, we're having fun. But yeah, he's definitely saved us from things that could have blown up to be bigger issues if we were a bigger company, I think.
So I want to go back to the Hostage, because when Reed gave me one of those unlabeled sticks that they were testing out as a blend that ended up being the Hostage, I actually got 2 of them. I fell in love, and that stick moved into my top 5 at the time. It was something that was like, wow, this is just buttery smooth and just great flavor and nice bold. And so talk about, what is that blend and how did you guys come up with it? And
yeah, Ray can actually tell. Ray's got a list. He can tell you the exact consistency. Like I said, the underground has really, really pushed us to be, top. We had to up our game. We smoked all kinds of stuff out of that shop, and especially a lot of their better blends. And so we really, really learned from what others were producing. And, we realized, look, we need to come up with some things that have some unique flavors. We needed to get some tobacco from some different regions. We had predominantly used a lot of our stuff and stuff locally right there in Nicaragua, right across the border. But we kind of expanded out and used some different tobaccos, used some different ligeros, and experimented with a little bit bolder profile. And that's how we went on the direction towards the Hostage.
Yeah, I think that has at least 2 Ligero, Nicaraguan Ligero, and a San Andreas wrapper. So that was our second San Andreas wrapper. The Trinitas was the first one. So San Andreas wrappers have become a pretty big hit in the industry. A number of producers are using those. But yeah, we just kept playing around with recipes and challenging the factory to come up with something that worked for us and that we thought would work for others. And then we go through a pretty extensive taste testing process here, not only between the partners, but we use a number of refined palates at the underground to help us with blends. We normally say if it's not box worthy in their opinion, we don't come to market with it, or we tweak it until we get a box worthy type rating from them. So we have other tasters locally that we use too. So it's not just what Jim and I like, it's really what we're trying to produce cigars that others like, not just what we care for. There are some blends that I think Jim and I would say that aren't necessarily favorites of ours that are in our portfolio, but other people love them. So that's fine.
Yeah, it's one of those things where my taste is not the same as Kay's, and Kay's taste is not the same as Carl's, and Carl's taste is not the same as Steve Greison's. We all have different tastes. And so let me ask, I've got 2 questions before I'll open it up to any questions from the people that are on the call. My first question is, how have you guys and the industry been hit with the FDA regulations that came out at the end of the Obama administration?
That's been the worst. It was like we finally felt like we were headed in a really good direction. We got in really well at the underground, and we were starting to really, I think we sold out in 2 or 3 months at one of the shipments that we brought in, and really, really enjoying some early success. I think the Trinitas got a 94 rating when we first brought it out, and we were really just getting some really positive feedback. The Hostage was named top 25 boutique cigar of the year by Boston Jimmy, and really picking up some momentum. And then bam, all the FDA problems and all those FDA issues, and it's really put a lot of the companies in the smaller companies in kind of a holding pattern. We're continuing to produce new cigars, but yet we're leery about producing too much because at any day it could come, collapsing in, and then we're stuck with a bunch of product that we can't get rid of. And so it's really, Ray can kind of speak into that a little bit better than I can, but it really shifted our entire focus and has up until, and still does.
Yeah, I think we always felt like we were going to stay small batch. For us, small batch is, I think the most of any one blend we've done has been 2000 run. Now we're doing as little as, with a band on it, let's say, a named cigar, as little as 300, and really up to 1,000. That's about it on any one factory order, for the reasons I just mentioned. In case it all comes crashing down and they put everything into effect that would affect our entire portfolio, with the exception, ironically, of the 2 inaugural blends. The way I understand it now, it's everything from August 2016. Is it August? I think it's August 2016. Everything would be grandfathered in if things were to go the way it's written now. So we would only end up with 2 blends that were on the shelf prior to August 2016. Everything else would have to go. If we wanted to keep them on the market, it would end up having to go through, the equivalent standard process, which, depending on what you read and who wrote it, it could cost anywhere from $25,000 a blend to, $100,000 a blend to go through all the scientific testing. So it would put us
and for a small organization like you just you don't have that.
No, we're done. If that goes into effect, we're done.
So back to Jim's point. So we're producing smaller batches, creating more blends, which has been kind of fun. Because then the demand, this last batch for the March event, Jim mentioned the Underground quite a bit. They have a yearly event in March, and they invite anywhere from 20 to 25 boutique suppliers, and we're one of them. This year we came out with six blends for that release, for that event specifically, but we only made 300 of each, and we sold out of all of them. And now we know out of those 6, there's 2 home runs, maybe 3 home runs, depends on who you ask. Really, they were all well received, and our next import, we're going to bring all 6 back, but small. But we're going to keep them small, and we're going to develop. We have 3 or 4 more new blends in process that will come in with this next import. So yes, we're addressing it, Steve, primarily by keeping the batch run small, and we would rather that be the case and demand be high, and we can turn product around in, I don't know, probably as quickly as 4 months, but optimally probably around 6 months, so that the cigars have a chance to rest before they come to market for at least 30 to 60 days.
Yeah. So what's the future? What do you guys want to see for Providencia Cigars? Well,
it's whatever the Lord wants, really. That's what takes all the pressure off of, I think, Jim and I both. He's working full time. This isn't as much as I'm sure Reed would like it to be. This is not a profit generating business in the sense of where we're drawing salaries and we're living off of the profits. We all independently have other financial resources that we're living off of. So the business really it's getting it to the point where it's self-sufficient, right? There's enough profit to put into another cigar. Every cigar sold, there's the money from that, the wholesale price or whatever the price is, goes back into producing another cigar, and it pays the bills. And it can pay for the next import. Right now, my wife and I are still financing a portion of the imports, but each import we get closer and closer to the profits being able to pay for more of that import, right? So it's all working as it should, and especially based on our volume. So, we're having fun, and we've always said, Jim and I both said that, when we stop having fun, we're done. So as long as we're having fun, we're going to keep going. And as long as we're able to initiate enough profit for the company to run as much of it on its own as possible without an influx, that's what we'll keep doing. I mean, ideally, I know Jim would love to switch gears and, have cigars be his main financial resource rather than teaching and coaching 2 soccer teams. He's the busiest man I know. He's got the full-time teaching gig, and I don't know if you mentioned about his soccer teams, but he's coaching 2 select soccer teams on top of that after school. So he goes from 7 in the morning until 9 or 10 at night, every night. He's traveling with both of his select teams. And so it's weekends, it's constant. So I know that, I think I speak with him. Ideally, the cigar business would turn into a profit center to where he could actually draw an income from and live off of it, right? But I think we're both very content with, whatever the Lord wants this business to be. That's what we're most happy about, because we're in a unique situation where we're not financially dependent upon the profits paying us to live off of. So we're in a very unique situation that way. There's probably only another handful of cigar companies out there that have that luxury, right? That maybe they're kind of doing it as a hobby on steroids kind of a thing, where again, the profits aren't necessarily profits that owner has to live off of because they have other funds. But that's not how the industry works. Like most industries, whatever you're producing a product, it's to pay the bills. It's to put, it's to have a life off of. I mean, I guess ideally that would be the case. For me, that's really not the issue. I want to have fun. I want to build relationships. I want our cigars to be a part of fellowship. Like you guys have embraced us, the Holy Smokes groups and other groups, to be able to use our cigars as a mechanism or a conduit to have spiritual conversations with people. That's my goal. Yeah. And if we can keep it like this, if everyone's content with us being able to, whatever money comes in from the company, to just have the company run, and it's not a financial resource for us personally. If everyone's cool with that, and the overarching, goal is, again, for the cigars to be a conduit to spiritual conversations, I think we would all be very happy with that.
Jim, anything to add to that?
No, I agree 100% with Ray. Obviously, it'd be nice to be able to slow down my lifestyle a bit and to be able to do something I love and be able to pay the bills as well. But, unfortunately, we're not able to be in that place right now, especially with the FDA decisions hanging over our heads. But we're having fun. I kind of look at this the same way I did when I was in Honduras and used soccer as a platform. This right now for Ray and I it's a huge platform. The people that we've been able to meet, the relationships that we've been able to get into with guys, the shops that, that we're not in a whole lot of, we're not in shops all around the U.S., but the shops that we're in, we're very close with the owners. We're very close with a lot of the patrons that go there all the time. We've befriended a lot of people, and we're really having a lot of fun with it. So I think Ray and I have talked about possibly expanding out to some Christian groups and camps and retreats, and possibly coming up with blends for, proprietary blends for the groups. And so we're batting a lot of different ideas around, but it all circles back around to Ray and I being comfortable with what we're doing, and making sure that we're still giving back to the Lord and using it as a tool and vehicle to share Christ with people.
That's beautiful. So we got some questions here in the chat. I'll ask them. So you got El Santo, you got El Padre, you got Trinitas. When is the Jesus stick coming out?
It's not a bad idea. I like that, actually.
And then Rod also asked, after the Jesus, I recommend the next one as Esteban for Steve Ryder.
That's funny, too. I like it. Yeah.
The Esteban. I like that.
I do, too.
Stick after me. I like that one. All right.
And kudos to you, Steve, and to Kay, and to the Holy Smokes group, to Garrett at Man Alive, the guy I deal with at Young Life, Jonathan Schultz, and who's at Ransom Heart. Aaron, no, what's his name? Can't think of his name right now. That guy I work with there. We're working with those three groups right now, and to expand on Jim's point, if we could actually put most of our focus on working with leaders of the men's organizations that are in the Christian community, and be a major supplier for them, I would love nothing more to feel so much more reward in being a part of that than trying to open shops up around the country. I'd much rather put the focus towards working with men that are wanting cigars to be a fellowship tool at their events.
Bryce asked the question, what do we do if we want to get Providencia to our local shops?
Great.
It's a good question. Yeah, and we've had help like that with others too. But thanks for asking that question. So basically, what I would recommend is that you can contact me, you can private message me and say, Ray, you know, I frequent a brick and mortar in my town. I'd love to take a couple of your sticks in and introduce them as a smoker of your brand to the shop owner. And that carries a lot more weight than me doing it because, right, for me, I'm a brand owner. It's all, you know, I'm going to be, at least in their eyes, you know, unbiased or biased towards the brand, I should say, versus somebody else that's coming in who's a consumer, bringing them a cigar that they may not be familiar with, that they're buying outside of the shop because they don't carry them. So yes, anyone that wants to do that, I'd be more than happy to send I probably would send 3 cigars, probably the El Padre, the El Santo, and either a Hostage or a Bloodshot or a Trinitas. You know, that should be enough that they can get an idea of, you know, what they're smoking. And then the other thing is that just to introduce them to the website. The website, I think, is a good website. It's pretty intuitive. Our story is there. All of our blends are there. All the wrapper, binder, filler, the description of all the cigars are there. So introducing people, check out their website, you know, whoever they're talking to. Hey, check out the Providencia website, get familiar with the brand, and then either the brand or the shop owner can reach out to us directly for samples, or any of the guys, gals can take some in. We'd be happy to do that.
And that website is providenciacigars.com. providenciacigars.com. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the Holy Smokes podcast.
Thanks for having us. I'm sorry it took me an hour to get plugged in, but it was probably better that way. I was going to say Satan's at work, man. He doesn't want me in on this thing. But I'm glad that you guys had an hour with Jim, because his story is really the crux of and it's much more interesting what he was doing in Honduras than what we're doing with cigars. But I'm glad you guys had time with Jim.
Jim, you were muted when you said your goodbye.
No, I was just saying, yeah, I was. Thank you, Steve. Thanks, guys, for taking the time out to talk with us and share Providencia's story. We're always grateful and thankful for anybody that wants to share our story and share our heart for cigars and relationship with people. And I look forward to meeting you in person, Steve. And I'm sure you'll have another place to stay. You can stay with me or Ray. We both have swimming. We both have swimming pools, so we got you covered there. So.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Gents, I am looking forward to hanging out, giving you a big bro hug, and having more than a couple sticks with you.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks, guys, for tuning in. I've had to flip around on my phone to see who's been in there, but that's great to see you guys. Hey, Zach.
Hey everyone, before we get to the rapid fire segment, I want to thank you for all the feedback that I've received about this show thus far. The encouraging notes, the suggestions, the thoughts have all been valued and appreciated. More than you know. To let me know what you think, you can private message me at Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Reiter. That's facebook.com/Steve Reiter. Or a private message to the Facebook page, facebook.com/Holy Smokes Cigar Club. That's facebook.com/Holy Smokes Cigar Club. Or send me an email at holysmokescigarclub@gmail.com. Thanks.